Microphone's on. Background sound is reasonable, hopefully.
I was looking at our sound. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's spiking. That's just my voice.
Hey, Darren. Oh, Darren beat Steven this
You
time.
beat Steve, Darren. You win a prize. It's a clap.
What's a prize?
It's a clap.
It's a not a good prize. It's something, right?
Yeah, it's something. It's something.
I don't even know if the microphone was on by the time that message got out there. All right. So we have the awkward experience of just staring into bright light. This is gonna be interesting. I really wish there was like a poster. We should get a cardboard cutout of one of the champions. Just pretend we're talking to that champion all the time.
That's fair. That's fair.
Or get a mirror.
A mirror to talk to ourselves?
Talk to ourselves.
Maybe.
So it's just a little bit less awkward. But I've gotten used to just like staring at the camera and doing that because I do the vlogs every morning, right? So
that's
yeah.
true.
At least here I'm not just by myself. I actually have a little post-it note that I have to put up when I'm doing my vlogs that says "Be more animate."
Be more animate.
Because normally I'm just like very stoic. Yeah, my dad called me out on that. He's like, I watch your vlogs every day and you just kind of sit there and it's just a talking head. You need to learn how to move your hands. I was like, oh, the other funny thing, my dad left a comment on Brad's article and then he calls me this morning. He's like, I don't understand what was happening in this article. Like, I love my dad. He's trying to understand the rules of the game so well. He's like, how does the affiliation thing work? What cards can you put in your deck? I'm like, I love my dad. He's learning. All right, so today we're talking about going second, the pros and cons, some things that we're making a list of all the cards we want to talk about, and then we start figuring out certain patterns. So talking about some of those patterns, talking about some champions that have certain advantages by going second.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about some cards that are more advantageous going first, but at the same time, how to capitalize them if you're going second.
Yeah.
Gonna be interesting chat. And where do we want to start? Do we just want to jump into the first card that you have?
I think so. It's the right place. Because just the initial statement was, what are the cards that immediately speak out in your mind of what are good cards to go second with? And immediately I said Purifying Wave and Meteorites.
So let's talk about, well, we got Meteorite.
Meteorite on the board.
So let's talk about that. Why is it so advantageous? If you're making a Meteorite deck, why is it so advantageous to go second?
So if your opponent goes first, play several summons, and you go second and just play a single Meteorite, you've most likely cleared the board. They've now blown a lot of resources, and you're essentially starting at square one with you setting up your board. And they on their next turn is playing their second board if they didn't overcommit to the board.
Yeah. I think you get a lot of value to waiting to see if your opponent overcommits. So this is one of the biggest reason new summoners, like people who are just starting to play summoners, when they fail, is because when they spend, just say 30 or 60 aura, the worst is when they spend 60 aura and you finish everything off by just spending 30. Then you're in the profit on card-wise, on resources. Just so much more value having that moment. I think a lot of people learn after that to not play all their summons at once.
It makes me think of a moment. Since Darren's in chat, that I think you were facing Darren, and Darren was so excited, I think threw down 3 Death Companions in the same spot, and then you walked up and just AoE'd them all.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens so regularly. People fall into that trap so often. And this is part of the reason why AoEs are so valuable in Genesis as a whole. But thinking about Meteorite, can you find those same advantages by going first?
With Meteorite? So the thing about going first is just on the following turn you could do it.
Yeah.
The weird thing that I will do in my Idris Blitz deck is I will just charge a Brook in. If I know I'm playing to Meteorite the board because my opponent's overcommitted, I'll just charge a Brook in as fast as I can to get 4 damage in from the opponent, and then I'll Meteorite. They're going to spend their time taking out the Brook, and then I can clear the board again and try to reset.
Yeah. I was also thinking about that because one thing you mentioned was like if you play the Meteorite and then you could set up your board for the next round, if you're going first and you try to do the same thing where you play the meteorite, wipe out the board, and then try setting it up again, your opponent can just respond by destroying you now your side of the board.
Yep.
So that's definitely a big play. I think in the same sense, Purifying Wave is the same conversation.
Yes.
So do I need to throw that up on screen? Do people not know what Purifying Wave does? I'll throw it up on the screen to be polite for everyone.
No, I fully agree. It's the exact same thing. It fits that same spot. But it does kill things with 6 HP.
Yeah.
The difference there.
I don't see a lot of people play Purifying Wave. I think the big hindrance there is that it is your HE. But so you're not going to make a deck around Purifying Wave, but it's a card that becomes...
I did.
Yeah?
I played a lot of Purifying Waves, and I played Fong and hoped that was enough. It wasn't. And I didn't draw the Purifying Waves when I needed them.
Yeah,
either.
That hurts. The thing is, like, especially when it... So if you're making a Purifying Wave deck, you now need to find a 3 or 4 Chi card that bounces out to give you your victory. But with a Meteorite deck, it's not quite the same.
Yes.
It's not the same tax on your deck to make a deck around Meteorite.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would see more people play. Plus, Meteorite can help you win the game. Purifying Wave can't. So I think Purifying Wave is great, especially if you're using Forethoughts, because now you can throw it into your Forethoughts. You win the first match by going first. You have a good sense that your opponent's going to go first in the second round. So now you swap in the Meteorites.
Yeah.
You don't have to decide if you're going first or second until after the swap, the lock and choke.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. So that's the thing. If you notice that your opponent's swapping in a bunch of Meteorites or a bunch of Purifying Waves, maybe force them to go first. All right, so that brought us into actually, do we want to jump into larger topics? So that brought us into the larger topic of just AoEs as a whole.
Yeah.
So we're talking, looking at Demon's Rage or Tsunami. Tsunami deck is your classic deck. That was your championship deck. So how would you play, if you're running the Tsunami deck, would you actually try to go second every single game?
No. So the advantage about second, and specifically with AoEs, is it's sort of the same thing as the Meteorite Purifying Wave, but those are the best for going second. Where the Tsunami requires the setup, and it's more about controlling the board. Like, one of the things I know when I started, most people were very confused when my first move was always double move Nubia forward. I think was my classic starting move. And a lot of people weren't expecting that, and they would get punished for it, because then I just need to take one more step up, and then I could clear the board off, no matter what they were running. But it just comes back down to control. If you go second, in the instance, your opponent moves, plays stuff, then you get to respond however you need to respond. If I don't need to come up in Tsunami, then I don't need to come up in Tsunami. If I now see that my opponent has dropped a bunch of stuff altogether, now I can double move. If I need to, I can Chrono Walker in Tsunami. If that's going to clear the board and give me full control of the board, that's when I'm going to do it. If an opponent plays a single summon or a wimpy summon, it becomes more awkward, because to invest all the extra resources to run up there to just hit a Cabus, it doesn't feel as good.
Do you think between when you made the Tsunami deck and played it last at the championship and now with J2 and Raze, I know that J2 is the reprint of the cards, but it does change what people have access to. Would you play the Tsunami deck the same way?
Would I play it the same way? Yes. Okay. I think that's just my play style. I don't think much of my play style has changed.
So it has less to do with AoE and more to do with just the fact that Tsunami is scoped. Like Meteorite, Purifying Wave, these aren't scoped. These are a little bit better when you're going second. Where Tsunami, you're now bounded by those 6 spots.
Yeah.
So you need to be in close so you can use it the way you want to use it every single time.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next group. So I talked about this in my vlog today. Alex scolded me for spoiling stuff. but I was like, no, I'm just hyping things up. But let's talk about the baboon, and specifically, what makes the baboon really good for going second versus.
Well, it's easy. It calms you.
It calms you.
Yeah, once you play that baboon and you're gone second, whatever your opponent's done doesn't matter no more.
It just doesn't matter. Life's good again. So my experience with playing it was whenever I went first, it died before I could get its attack in. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest issue. It became so much of a threat that either it would die or your opponent would just take 2 steps away, and then it would never get its attack in.
Yeah,
it was really, really hard to close in on your opponent when playing first. And this is a card that I really can see people building decks around. Like it is
easily. Is
it the premise of the Idris Splits deck? Or is that still on the Baroque side?
It is definitely half and half, roughly about. Okay. The Baroque definitely quickly ends the match. Where it was the difference between the two.
Okay.
Whereas the baboon you need to be in the right position.
Okay.
But you are right. Going second allows that position a lot easier to be done. Because if your opponent steps up, then you step up, then your baboon's going to be able to move and hit, all that type of stuff. Otherwise, usually with the Idris Blitz, which is strange, is you usually don't get to fireball on the first turn, because you generally need to double move if your opponent has moved left or right, usually when you're facing angels.
Okay.
Because you need to get your blitz up to the enemy champion as fast as possible. So unless you got the Baruchs and the Malicious Persuasion, and you don't, I'm gonna go through the whole list. Malicious Persuasion or a Jump or Leap. Those are the other things that will get you there. You need to get up there.
Yeah.
You need to outrace the angels before the angels can kill you. You have to kill the enemy champion.
And this is part of the reason why actually going second is very valuable for the deck, because if they're playing Nubia, you don't know if they're playing angels, if they're playing Tsunami, or if they're playing something else altogether. And you want to see what their first move is. If they move to the side and drop an angel, that changes your strategy compared to them taking 2 steps forward.
Yeah.
Depending on what their move is. So this is a deck that game 1, I could very easily see someone game 1, you win the dice roll, you decide to go second, because that's going to be more advantageous for you. And it's in the second game, swap out all your baboons for a whole other set, so that you're playing just something completely different. Because I think part of the value of the Blitz deck is the surprise of it too.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely... Champions aren't as hardy as we think they are. They will drop fast when there's a whole lot of baboons attacking them.
Yep. So the baboon is definitely more advantageous if you're going second. Baruch, on the other hand, can sustain if it's going first or going second.
Yes, but the reason why the baboon's better than the Baruch, because if you go first, you step up, place the Baruch is now defenseless. Your opponent now gets to move up, respawn, kill it. Mm-hmm. You might get a trigger in there, an attack with the Baruch, but your opponent knows that. So if they're smart, they're just going to stack whatever they're doing on top of that.
Yeah.
And so it just comes back to that. If you went second with the Baruch, your opponent's now exerted. You know their end position.
Yeah.
You can now move up, play your Blitz creature. It can move and maybe get them, depending on where they went.
All right. Let's... So this kind of took us down a well of other cards that... These were the like Purifying Wave, Meteorite, Baboon, Baruch. These were the ones that we immediately thought of when it came to going second. Then we started going through the list of all the cards and trying to figure out what other options there are. And we came up with a few that were definitely edge case cards. Well, so we're going to show Stone Protector. Stone Protector is something that's definitely very meta relevant. And I think people are still trying to find the right way to use them and the right quantities for the deck. Mm-hmm. Because since they're not a win con, you can't spam your deck with them. But when you want them, you want them. You can't
very true.
live without them. So Stone Protector, I think we're in agreement that it's better if you're going second.
Yes. There's a very specific reason why, is that if you go first, either you yourself are going to have to activate, or your Stone Protector is going to activate. And if your Stone Protector activates, it can no longer relocate. It is now full defenses down when it's almost its whole purpose
Yeah.
Well, not its built purpose was to get you across the board, but its now current played purpose is to defend whatever it's caring about.
Yeah. I think this leads down the well of support summons. There aren't a lot of them in the game, and the only one that really does get played is Stone Protector, but I think as more summons come out that have these auxiliary purposes besides just winning you the game, dealing damage, we're going to see more summons that favor wanting to go second. And it's a big reason of it too is you want to know what your opponent's doing right off the bat. So you decide, do I play this creature now where it could be exposed, or is it a safe time to play?
Yeah.
If your opponent ends up starting the game by taking one step forward and one to the right, then you want to move to the left and drop this summon to your left. So it's the furthest distance away. You want to be able to plan those things. Last thing you want is to drop your Stone Protector, drop an Angel on it, be feeling comfortable, and the opponent living shadows right beside the Stone Protector knocks it out.
Yeah.
Or does something crazy and knocks out the Stone Protector, and then Puppet controls the Angel. And then you're just like, oh, this hurts, right? You want to know how safe your summons are. So I think in a lot of ways, I see summoners do, as a whole, just having a lot more like it being more advantageous for them going second. But we're going to get to champions in a bit because we have a list of a couple champions we want to talk about. The other one that's on my list of cards that definitely benefit if you're going second is, let me pull it up awkwardly, just scroll through cards as I'm vamping here and, wasting time. Where is it here? Foresight of the Ancient. So I have a story behind this. I actually made a multiplayer deck that was completely around just doing... There wasn't a single win con in the deck. There wasn't anything that really dealt damage. I ran meteorites, but very few of them. I think there were only 2 or 3. The entire purpose of this deck was things like Shadowclaw, Temporal Relocation, not Shadowclaw, Shadow's Grasp, Temporal Relocation, Foresight of the Ancient, and Lambs to the Slaughter. Just things that can really muck up the gameplay, mess with players' strategies. That was the big goal of it. And then I wrote one dice roll and decided that I would start every single round. And Foresight of the Ancient became absolutely useless because, one, I didn't have any summons besides Pale Fox. So I did not create a board state where my summons could survive long enough that my champion would be unexerted at any point in the game. Basically, the only way Foresight would work is if I created my own stack. And that never happened. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of those cards definitely benefit, but Foresight itself, because of that exert cost, it's locked down that if you want the most advantage out of this, you need to find a way that your champion is the last one activated in every round.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I don't know if there's much more to talk about in that. That was a very deep dive into it. It's very pretty artwork, too.
That's very true.
It's actually one of my favorite artworks from Jay.
Well, speaking of artwork, Steve says, we need an alternate art Calm Baboon card.
All right, we'll talk to Camilla about that.
Just take the exact same baboon, use the same background, but make it more zen.
More zen. All right, so this was one that we saw as we were just scrolling through the cards. Pulling up. Necrolich. So, what are your thoughts behind this?
I think it comes back down to control again. And usually when we're talking about control, we're talking about board state control.
Okay.
And going second allows you to play the Necrolich, get a second summon. They're all safe if your opponent's already gone at this point.
Okay.
Is one step. What were your thoughts?
So my thoughts are around options, right? If I'm the last, part of it is going second, part of it is just being the last thing that's exerted every single round. If my champion is the last thing exerted in every single round, then I could see what the board state looks like. I could see what has died that I want to bring back. So if I play Gilded Stag in the previous round and I'm going first, it depends on how many things are on the board, but it's going to be interesting to try to operate so that you make that decision when you play the Necrolich, do I bring my Gilded Stag back or not? If you're going second every single round, you're one step ahead of that, because now if you are even sized army, then you will be going last, which is great there. It gives you that one extra buffer space, basically, which I really like. And for me, I'm all about using Necrolich to bring back things that I've already beckoned that have died, compared to thinning my deck out just to get things into my discard pile and bringing them back. I'm not a resurrect player. I'm a like sustain my army type of concept. So I don't know how, I was all about like taking a Gilded Stag, running it in the center of things, doing as much damage, make it a threat, force your opponent to make decisions and try to kill it, like you were talking about the Brook earlier. And then once it dies, then be like, all right, now it's coming back.
Yeah.
And that really annoys my opponents. So that's my strategy around it. It's more about having more time to think about options that are available and capitalizing off of decisions my opponent made.
Have we talked about how having more summons than your opponent allows you to be the player going second?
We have. I touched on it in a vlog where right after playing Darren in the release of J2 when I came over for the sealed, and I was playing a game where I just beckoned to summon and had it like round 1 I beckoned to summon, round 2 I separated from it and just had it like navigate around.
Yeah.
So that I could always be second. No, it wasn't in the sealed. It was in that tournament where I played the Idris starter. Because going first was just so painful for that deck. And that's the thing. Going second is... a lot of these situations we're talking about, it's not so much going second. It's being the last in the turn. I think that's the bigger advantage. All right, last card.
Healing Fire.
Yeah. All right, let's throw that onto screen. I think Chain Lightning follows the same principles, but...
So Chain Lightning is not exactly the same, because Chain Lightning, you go up to your opponent, and they interact with it. The reason why Healing Fire is better going second is you know where your opponent is, you may now move away from the opponent, and now you can play a chain that is a lot more likely to resolve, because your opponent's not going to interact, because it's out of position.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference.
Yes. I think I found myself in a lot of situations where, like the moment your opponent puts Healing Fire on the stack, your first situation that you need to think of is how do I break this chain?
Yeah.
Right? They define all the targets. Your goal now is to break that chain, because if you can do that in such a way, especially if you're killing one of those targets, then your opponent's out of 7 chi. They're out, how much aura is it? 16 aura? They're out 16 aura. And their entire strategy just fell apart because they were probably banking on themselves getting at least 3 or 4 health out of this.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, that's your biggest goal. However, if all your units are exerted, you can't Stone Protector over there.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of relocation things that are at Swift Speed that cost exert. But I think the biggest thing is... Stone Protector and other summons on your team that can do the range damage or whatever distance damage to kill one of those targets.
Yeah.
Like if you can malicious your Scorpion to go in and hit that Death Companion for 3. I'd say Death Companion because the biggest deck I think of is the Healing Fire Death Companion deck, which is annoying but manageable.
See, I'm used to the Puppet Control Healing Fire deck, so it's whenever you are playing, that's the thing that's getting Healing Fired.
So you steal a creature and then Healing Fire?
Yeah. To pay off your puppet, it brings back your puppet control life total, and then that summon is a lot more stronger for you than it was for the opponent. That's what Steve's running. Steve has been running a lot.
I want to see that card list. I want to see that. That seems really interesting to me. All right, so sorry, it's, just thoughts coming across my mind now. All right, so yeah, Healing Fire. It is the fact. So there's so many of these big, powerful bomb cards that you want to.
I just thought of another card.
Yeah.
What Puppet Control?
That's true. It's in the same vein. Like I'll throw Puppet Control up because we've been talking about it enough, and I don't know if everyone watching knows what Puppet Control does. Actually, I had to spend some time finding the Healing Fire because I realized it wasn't actually in J2. And I'm just looking through the folder in J2. Puppet Control's in J2, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, there it is. I love the artwork for that. So these really powerful cards, you want as little resistance to them as possible. That's the big goal. So when you go second, your opponent's more likely to be exerted. All their summons are more likely to be exerted. You get a little bit of time to try to get your champion to be the last activated unit on the board.
Yeah.
Now, if you're playing, this just crossed my mind. If you're going first, but you're playing a deck that prefers going second, Adrenaline could be really good for that.
Sure.
Because then you can force yourself to be the last one on the board.
Yeah, you could.
But yeah, I like Puppet Control. I like Healing Fire for that. We did mention Malfeasance, and at the end of the day, Malfeasance, the thing that falters Malfeasance
isn't going first or second.
Yeah.
It's a swift defense card.
Yeah.
From the hand. It doesn't matter whether you're going to go first or you're going second.
Yeah, there are
And it
two
goes up.
summons I can think that could falter Malfeasance, and that's Stone Protector and Pushy.
Yeah, push it.
The Jin. Pushy Jin. But yeah, I think this is a really solid list. So going over that list, we had a couple conclusions that we came to. First, I want to put it out there, and I can't believe we didn't start this way, but do you prefer going first or second?
It completely depends on the deck. And
There
we've
isn't,
had
like,
this a
an
lot
average?
of talk. No, because if you are facing a Thymos champion, you need to take the first away from them. Because you don't want to be paralyzed by landslide decks and stuff like that.
That's true.
And so it varies a lot. When I take into factor what my deck is, I take into factor what my opponent deck is.
Okay. Now, again, should have asked these questions from the very beginning. We just jumped right into the cards. So I'm sorry to anyone who watches this later and is like, this was the information I was really looking for. But the other question I have in mind is, from your experience playing the game, a lot of people say that the game is completely biased towards going first. How do you respond to that?
If you're playing Thymos, sure. If you're not, you're probably wrong.
So, the way I approach it is when people first start playing the game, they're usually playing offensive. If they just played the demo deck or the starter decks, I say, you've only played really aggressive offensive decks. And those decks prefer going first.
Yeah.
When you start playing slower control decks or high-end tactical strategy decks, those are the ones that find a lot of advantage going second. It just comes down to playstyle and what the game state dictates. I think it's really interesting that now we're starting to see a lot of decks that that decision actually matters.
Yes.
In the days of alpha and beta, I don't think your opponent's deck dictated that as much. It was just your own deck told you. So if you're running, because in alpha and beta, landslide was not played.
Okay.
Landslide, people played
That's
Guardian
fair.
Bounds, but no one touched landslide.
It cost a lot of aura.
Yeah.
And those champions couldn't really run it too well. Idris is their closest one.
Yes.
Yeah.
You didn't have Erica. So Guardian Bounce was played, and people who heavily played it with Guardian Bounce wanted to go first.
That makes
But
sense.
landslide wasn't played. So knowing your opponent's deck, that wasn't a big decision. The biggest decision was, how does your deck play and what's your strategy? And there wasn't also a lot of control cards in alpha and beta. So going second didn't have as much advantage. A lot of the cards we're talking about, so Purifying Wave, Meteorite were there, but all the other cards we talked about, they came out in Welcome to Jalara or Raise. So the game's definitely shifted in its tone.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking at it now, there's definitely a lot of advantages to going second. So, okay. Let's talk about some of the champions that have an advantage. Where do you want to start?
At the top of our list,
All right, we'll start at the top of our list.
Top of our list, bottom of the champion list. We're going to start with Odara. So it just comes back to that same thing we talked about. You want your opponent defenseless so that you can now drop a summon, unexert it, so it essentially gets pseudo blitz.
Yes.
And now that your opponent's defenseless, you can now use this summon either to A, control the board and clear out one of their summons, or B, be aggressive and take out and just damage the champion.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's whatever your game plan is out.
I think there's also the fact that there are enough offensive cards that do cost exert, but it's also your opponent's just built-in attack. That you want them to not have that option. If they're going to kill my summon, I want them to expend a card to do it.
Yeah.
So if I'm swinging in with, so if I drop, it was a good 4 health. Is there a good 4/4 for Odara?
What do you mean by good? Mongol.
Mongol. So if for some reason I'm deciding, okay, round 1, I'm just gonna drop Mongol in front of me and just charge my opponent in the face with it.
Yeah.
I don't want them to use their built-in attack to just finish that off, right?
Well, that'd just be bad playing if you run up into their attack and just respond back and attack for 2.
Like,
you just spent 18 aura and 4 energy.
Yeah.
Just to exert them.
Yeah. Like but if you want to be able to strike them on round 1, I think that's your best. Most of the time, you're going to be hitting them in the face.
Yeah.
So I want them to expend something. Now, at 2 health, they can just play a Rampage Toss. So there's a lot of ways to deal with 2 health. But once you start getting a little bit higher, 3 or 4 damage, that's starting to cost serious, it's a serious cost, right? So I don't want them to be able to use... I'm trying to think, there's a Bellum card that I know costs exert, but I don't know why it's eluding me.
There's the defensive card.
No, like an offensive card that costs
offensive card that costs exert. One of the thrust.
Yeah. But they wouldn't be playing that anyways. But like the whole entire point is just limiting your opponent's options. Right? So it's a shame because Odara just isn't played very much. We're hoping to change that.
Oh, Dara.
It's like whenever things happen, like people make memes of Canada. I'm like, oh, Canada. All right, let's talk about some real champions.
All right. Probably the best champion for going second here is Idris. Just the power of going second and saying, play a 2 HP summon, please.
Yeah.
To your opponent is just a joke almost. And if you're playing against Idris, and I think this might be one of the things I don't know if we've advised, because there was this question about people were saying how does the Raha versus deck beat the Idris deck, and we've played it a lot. It went back and forth constantly. You have to play 2 summons at the same time in the Raha deck.
Yeah.
If you don't, Idris can just fireball it on this turn, and if it's 2 health instead. If it has 4 health, it dies next turn.
Yeah. And there's also a cost efficiency to it. Like, if you're playing Raha and you're dropping something with 4 health, you're probably... just say you drop Blackstone Golem. That's costing you more than 10 aura.
Yeah.
Right? The only advantage you got was 1 round of an additional turn in your... additional turn for your team.
Yeah.
But besides that, you spent more aura, spent more cards, because Idris's Fireball is just built in.
Yep.
And... you really haven't done a whole lot with that. And so, yeah, it's really difficult. If Idris is going second, it's really hard for you to get the advantage around that. Yeah. I mean, it's similar if Idris is going first, because they could just fireball you next round. But I think the biggest issue I always have with Idris if I'm going first is, do I fireball the champion or not?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, I'm like, I'd rather save that aura for a potential threat down the road, but on the other hand, I have the opportunity to just hit them right now. It's not always a clear-cut answer.
For me, it is always fireball. Always be fireballing.
Yeah, I hold back every now and then because I've gotten too many games where at the end of the game I'm like, I just need 5 more aura to back in something else. So I don't always waste my... unless I'm playing against Nubia, anyone with 24 or less health.
That's fair. Like, if you're facing somebody with the high end of health, then I would maybe agree it's time to look back and not necessarily fireball the champion every turn. You definitely need a more consistent threat than just the
Yeah.
2 damage right now.
Yeah. Like Kun, Long, or Malik, you're probably holding back a little bit, or considering your options.
Yeah.
But you're playing against, especially if you're playing against a Haas. Rain just dies so much to Idris.
Oh.
Poor Rain. All right, so Idris decks, I would more often than not, I like going second with Idris. And then our next one is Long.
Long.
Where is Long? Long's here.
There's several longs.
He's a long ways away. My big thing. So I play Long a lot. I like going second because I can figure out how much distance I can get from my opponent, so I can overinvest into a summon. I like having my summons at a point where they are equivalent to a champion in a lot of ways. I don't want them with that much health, but like to a point where my opponent has to invest a decent amount of resources to try to kill off a summon, especially something like Zamperdragon or something with some built-in invasion, because my opponents are not enjoying that at all. So knowing that, just say I'm playing against Idris, having her to force waste a fireball against me, I love that, because that just saves my summon some health next round. Playing against angels, it's good to know when the angels are coming out, where they're coming out, and are they dropping on top of the stone protector, because that changes my strategy.
That's very true.
I think Long needs to respond to the board state, so you can make sure that if you're spending that 4 energy on a summon, that summon's gonna survive, because 4 energy, he's the only one who dies to mill. He's the only one who dies to running out of cards in his timeline. So you need to make sure you're doing that properly. So that's my reason, my justification. If I'm playing Long, I would like to go second.
Yeah, for me, it's similar. I like to build up my champion as long as possible. As if I get to see what my opponent's doing, I know the best way to react to that, and then build up my board for that specific defense. So I guess that's what you said.
Yeah,
that is what you said at the end of the day.
Yeah. A lot of going second is really just, are you someone who wants to be causing the threats or responding to the threats?
Yeah.
So here's the one exception where going second is, it's an interesting scenario. So let's talk about Fong. So we brought this up. People so rarely ever use Fong's secondary ability, the Fire Shield.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, the only way to use it is by going second. It's like Foresight of the Ancient.
It's true.
Yeah. Would you ever build a Fong deck that excels at going second?
Well, I did talk to you a little bit.
Yeah.
I said that at one point I wanted to build a enraged gorilla deck, because you need to prevent enough damage that they still hit the gorilla, but you just want to prevent a little bit so it doesn't die. You want to prevent it down to 1. Just a little bit of defensive cards for the gorilla. You need that fire shield. What's the other one that prevents from the far distance?
Air shield.
Air shield. Just those little fun things like that.
Yeah. So on our list, the only card that really works for Fong was Purifying Wave. I guess you could try to make a Fong Baboon Purifying Wave deck.
I do actually have a Fong Baboon deck with using the Gilded Baboons. Just because the aura of the baboon is not overbearing for Fong.
Yes, that's true.
Is why it works out. It works out pretty good.
Yeah.
I think I also have a Pauper deck, which I call Pauper, which was common, uncommon.
Yeah.
It was commons and uncommons. Because I built it back when J2 didn't exist and baboon wasn't uncommon.
That's right.
Yeah. Nice to see you, Ben. Thanks for joining.
Yes, we do. We're finally able to meet in person, which is, it feels like it's been a long time. Even though we do see each other regularly, it still feels weird. I think this is one of the few times we've actually met and we're not wearing masks either.
It's true.
Because we're usually at your store. And anyways, yeah, I do talk about this in the vlog a lot, which is the 10% situation. So if a card costs 10% of your starting aura, then it's a comfortable position to be in.
Yeah.
You want cards that you want to spam cost 10% or less. Cards that you want to invest into would cost more than 10%. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't play Fong, and that's partly because when we started the design of Genesis, Lionel played Fong exclusively. So that was the only champion I didn't touch. My favorite was playing Rain in those days, but like, yeah, I never built a solid Fong deck. But if I were to, I think another summon that I would really like to see, and I think has some merit going second, is Zamperdragon. Because of its range. As long as it's unexerted, you have this huge area that your opponent can't enter.
Yeah.
And if it's behind Fong, it now creates this protective area around her where your opponents can't just sneak into you.
Mm-hmm.
So going second, running Fong, going second, Zamperdragons, Gelder Baboons, and then you got the air shields, you got the fire shields. It could be a very interesting deck.
Yeah.
You just now need to figure out how you'd manipulate the deck with your forethoughts so that you could, when you are going first, the deck be just as advantageous.
Yes.
And I think the only thing you really need to pull out is the baboons at that point.
Fair enough. It's very easy to fit any technique into a Fong deck.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not you generally don't run out of energy unless every card in your deck is like energy.
Yeah.
And it's usually this. It has to be a 7 chi that's costing you 8 energy. That's making you run out. You're either running Rain of Arrows or a lot of Revenge of the Phoenixes. That's the only time you're milling out. And somehow the game's gone so long that you've played so many of them that you've decked out.
Yeah, Fong is definitely an interesting champion. I think, I'm really excited for Origins for Fong because I think she'll see a lot more play once those cards come out. Not spoiling too much about Origins. Let's switch over to talking about a few cards that people... there's a lot of frustration about some of these cards because they say it only works if you're going first.
Fair enough.
And I don't agree with that.
No. Well, Guardian Balance is all on the screen for you guys, but you didn't say the card yet. So I was like, yes, Guardian Balance is the one. No, it's still a body. It still swings for 5 damage. That's a lot of damage, boys and girls.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that the only way for DAPs to be valuable is if you play it right at the beginning of the round, stopping all damage whatsoever. No, a lot of times I find myself in a situation where I'm going second, my opponent starts around and they're like, well, I'm just gonna tease things out, so let me move this Combust, or let me just attack you with this Inferno Imp and something like that. And it's like, wait, I'll take the damage, that's fine. I'm okay with taking 2 damage. Let's cancel out the rest of the round by playing Guardian Balance. The card has a lot of value when you're going second. It's about strategizing around it, though. Like maybe not beckoning it right in the middle of everything because it won't be able to go first next round. True. So it'll just die instantly.
It's definitely a summon I highly suggest playing to your left or your right because it will automatically protect you. And then its offensive awareness is actually essentially Tsunami in front of it. Because it's going to move up 1 and be able to hit anything.
That's true.
So its threat radius is actually really big.
Yeah.
And unless your opponent is directly 3 squares in front of it, that's the only way for them to go double move right in front and take it out. And that's because you should, if you positioned it to be right in front of them, that's probably the wrong positioning. Because if you put it on the opposite side of you, I'm using my hands for a lot of examples that none of you guys can see. If you put it on the left side of you, it's protecting in front of you. So your right side's the only spot open. Yeah. And then if you just move and the Guardian Balance moves over back to your spot and rotates, that right side is now in its offensive section as well.
So side story, when my first print test of Guardian Balance, it has Swift Attack.
Jesus.
And it was super broken.
there was somebody when I first started who did like some mathematical equation. They're like, I did some math on all the summons in the game. Guardian of Balance is the best value for your buck. Somebody told me this. That was a long time ago, and I went, okay. I didn't I couldn't refute it or anything. I don't know. I was just like, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Actually, a lot of people don't know this, but when we first designed the formula, which now dictates how the cost of everything should be, Carl came to a game design meeting once, and he reverse engineered it. He started off with a 3/3, and it was like, no, it wasn't a 3/3. It was I think it was Hunting Hound. He started with Hunting Hound. He's like, okay, if this is supposed to cost 5, then we're now talking about, like, I correlated all the numbers, and then he got to Death Eater and was like, well, if we equate 1 health to 5 aura, then this works out too. And then he slowly found that everything matched, and I'm like, that's awesome, because I just was gut feeling it. Like, everything was just on gut instinct in alpha and beta. And now we have a very detailed formula, and even something as ridiculous as Angel is only off by like 1 or 2 points.
Yeah. And
So-
we said if we talked about this, I don't know if we talked about it in last week's thing where we talked about Tribal, or me and you talked about it afterwards while talking about Tribal, was that if we were to give a calculation to Tribal, should Tribal cost less? And if it did, then Angel's on point.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. But back to our talk about Guardian Balance and going second. This is a card that I would not design my forethoughts around to pull out if I was knowing I was going to go first in the next game.
Yes. Yeah.
It still has a lot
Is
of
it a
value.
card you bring in from your sideboard if you know you're going to go first?
Potentially.
Yeah.
It depends on what your deck style is, but
Yeah,
just say
for
I'm
sure.
running a long summoner and my main summon is Archon of Vigor. I could consider running Guardian Balance. The great thing about Guardian Balance is being able to drop it and then drop something else really threatening
Yeah.
that you know your opponent will normally try to wipe out immediately, and letting the Guardian Balance protect it. So a great example of that is with Stone Protector.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could definitely see this as something I'll put into my forethoughts to swap in certain games if I know I'm gonna have the lead. If I'm running like a Stone Protector Angel deck, I can consider pulling out a few bolt shots to try to get these in, because turn 1, we just talked about all the advantages there are about going second. Turn 1, drop a Guardian, drop a Stone Protector, drop an Angel on top of it. Now your opponent can't kill that Angel, can't do anything, can't meteorite it. I guess they can still Purifying Wave, but if they Purifying Wave, you're kind of... Don't play all your summons against Ajna. That's what it comes down to. But if they're not playing Ajna, then there's no way for them to kill your Angel. So you're in a pretty good position. All right, the next card. This is much more obscure. Actually, it's an organized play, isn't it?
It's an organized play, yeah.
Which, if you're an LGS or you are in contact with your LGS, tell them to reach out to us about signing up for organized play. We need to get more stores signed up. It's gonna be rolling out soon. Where am I looking? It's in beta, right? The last printing of it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at Trudge.
Trudge.
Where is it? There it is. The one with the bunch of Brooks on it. It's the same artist who did Brooke, so it seemed like it made sense.
Yeah.
Does this card have much value if you're going second?
It can still have value. It just doesn't have as much game-breaking value of just your opponent just doesn't get to play a turn.
Yeah.
That's essentially the difference. It has more value when your opponent is playing summons. So that way, if your opponent's taking 1 turn, you can still exert a powerful summon on their side.
Yeah.
If you really need to. That's where it can still be played.
This is a card that I'd probably consider swapping out if I know that next game, I'm not likely to be going first.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's kind of one of the beauty of the Trudge deck is you win the coin toss. You beat your opponent by going first all the time. So then when your opponent has a choice to decide if they're going first or second, they're going to choose to go first because they don't want to get locked down. Then you swap out all your Trudges.
Yeah.
And then, that gives you the advantage. I don't know if this actually makes me consider like revisiting that rule of should you just decide if you're going first or second before the lock-in show.
For the lock-in show.
It's a conversation.
Yep.
we had.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I think at the end of the day, Trudge is a card that is purely beneficial for if you're going first. It's not something I would run if I knew I was going second.
Yeah.
And then the All-Encompassing Landslide, it's super powerful.
It combines what we just said about Trudge with damage. So it's more you can use it way more than you can do with Trudge. If you
Yes.
go second, it's still going to do damage.
Yeah.
It can still clear an opponent's board. But if you go first, you get to say, No, you did not get to play Genesis this turn.
You do not get to play. Leave. Yeah, it's still a card that I think no matter what the situation, you should still, if those are part of your main board and your deck's comfortable playing landslides, don't pull them.
I could see a reasoning to cutting back a few.
Okay.
Just because if you're in second, so they're not going to have as much utility as they are as going first.
Yeah.
So you don't want to draw a ton of these and then just be out of aura. So if you cut it, if you just peel a couple off, just a couple, it makes it much safer. Unless you're like, well, I need 6 damage to deal with angels. I need 2 landslides. Keep them in.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what are your other options, but for the most part, yeah, if your answer to the angel is landslide and that's your only answer, you're probably gonna have to keep them in.
Yeah.
Did you see him's second gameplay video?
I have not seen the second gameplay video yet.
That Malik deck has so many good answers for angels, but also just universally just good answers.
Mm-hmm.
But specific to the angel, it did a really good job. So I like that video. I think that kind of goes through our entire list. So let's switch over. Where's my camera? Hey, it's just us now. So the question I get asked all the time, we talked about like the advantages of going first. If you had the opportunity to sit with me when I was originally designing Genesis, do you think you would have advocated that the first player role is alternated?
I think I would have, but only in the sense because of my knowledge. If you're talking about we were both in that time, I would have assumed that just doesn't make sense. You gotta go back and forth after playing it. And I think I had this recent conversation. You told me that people do the back and forth. And then when I examined that, I went, going second is just broken. You get to respond to the first person. So if they move up, you now get to position yourself to immediately go again and just destroy them.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
What about another rule that we tested out was the idea that the last person to exert something is the second on the next round.
Is the second on the next round. That's interesting. I've never played that in my head before. So it's interesting because now it's like, do you build decks to purposely take the second play and have more summons to get the second play? Is that so? What was the reasoning behind that one at the time?
It was a way to help because the perception was that going first was always advantageous. It was always the best move.
Yeah.
So it allowed for people who are in a disadvantageous situation, who are being swarmed, to allow them to stay going first.
See, I would see how that's broken in a different way, because now I would purposely build a deck with 0 summons.
Yeah.
That could always... It's essentially, I just run my Nubia deck. And now you're like, I always get first, so even if you have 10 summons, I can just position myself to Tsunami them all.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to, and this is one thing I find a lot of people who are not comfortable with newer rule sets to a game, or a game that challenges the status quo, is that they think that it needs to adapt to what the status quo is. But the reality of it is that the game is now posing a new challenge that you need to rise up to and conquer. And I talked about this in the vlog, but this is one of those games that if you lose a match, it's on you to then look on how you can improve, rise up to that same challenge the next time and conquer it, not just pass off responsibility to something else, right? This is a big reason why we don't have Mulligan.
That's why I annoy my players when they play against me. As soon as the game ends, I tell them all the things they could have improved on.
Yeah.
I'm like, and most of the times it's like, you did really good and you made this one bad play.
Yeah.
And this one bad play made you lose the whole game. And here's how.
I lost so many games to that one bad play. So many games. So I don't know. I think the not having mulligan, not having the alternating turn order, I think it was the right call for the game. I think when the game first came out, it made sense not having sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I did not account for was card pool expansion. And that's where the Forethought sideboards really started mattering, because it wasn't just... You're not just dealing with two types of decks. Like, if we talk about the rock, paper, scissors of the game, the caster, fighter, summoner, you're not just dealing with fighters or casters. There's so many subsets of those. And as the card pool grows, we're going to see more and more of those. So I think Forethoughts make sense because it allows you to adapt. But I don't think it's fully necessary for the game to have mulligans or to have the turn order alternate.
Yeah. I still been an advocate. I think I've talked to Sid about this. I don't think it's a bad thing to have cards that might mess with that status quo. But, because that's now something that you need to think about yourself in a game. But that's down the road.
Yeah.
Designing.
I've designed a card that essentially made you the starting... Like, it was you or target champion became the starting champion, so you could pass that priority and the game situation would change. I ran through the thought experiment. It worked fine, but never got around to actually testing it. Maybe that's something we could throw into Future League. And
yeah, you actually several months ago told me to throw that into Future League, and I never did.
Yeah. The big concern I have with that is either... It's like Selective Amnesia. Selective Amnesia could have been a card that was very heavily played, but it actually went the other side of the coin, where it's just not played.
And I agree with that. I think some decks will extremely be hindered because people will think that it's such an important card. But I get this perspective of not. I say, you're losing a whole resource out of your hand to play this one card. Yeah. It's probably not worth it at the end of the day.
The question is, will that one resource push you enough to then change the entire game, give you the win?
Yeah.
If it will, then yeah, it's worth it. If it doesn't, then it's definitely a challenge. Anyways, I think we can just wrap things up.
I think it's time to wrap up. Yep. People are walking in the house. We gotta hide.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have a good one. Bye.